Okay. You guys should be seeing the stream pop up here in a second. Not sure who's here. It's still kind of buffering on my end on the site, but if there is anybody here, welcome to the Shading and Lighting 2 live session for week 1. It's a really cool week, actually. I really love the topics we do in Shading and Lighting 2. I like the projects. Everything about this particular class has been really fun. So I think everyone that's kind of going through this class is going to have a really good time. Just learning about materials, colors, how you make surfaces look a certain way. A lot of fun stuff to get into, and this is going to be kind of cool too because it's going to lead into uh, a lot of your other classes. Like you're going to have a digital painting 2 class. You start getting into like texturing and material properties inside a painter. This is going to prepare you for that. It doesn't matter if you're going into like games, Unity, the Unreal Engine, even if you got out of Maya into like a different 3D software. Pretty much everything that has to do with materials, you're going to be able to benefit from this particular class. So, for anyone that is here, it might be a small turnout tonight, but if anyone is here, feel free to just say hi in the chat. Let me know you're around. But let's just jump in here, and we'll do a few things. All right, so I'm going to bring up the class. Okay. So week 1, Shading and Lighting 2, is honestly fairly straightforward. It's going to be the first time that you guys are seeing surface properties. Hey, Michelle, welcome to the party. And Janessa, awesome. We're growing. Yes, everyone's getting out of work, and as soon as you get back from work, you're jumping into the live stream. So I do appreciate that. But this whole first week is going to be about creating material properties. And I haven't gone through any of the projects yet, but I know everyone has turned in one activity already. There's a discussion you guys are doing due Sunday. This discussion is honestly not too bad. Those are fairly straightforward. But aside from that, we do have this guy, and this is really the one I wanted to focus on today, is the next activity where you're constructing something. So some of you may have already gone through here and started watching the videos, or maybe you just kind of, quickly scan through the activity just to get a rough idea of what's going on. But the main idea for 1.3, which is going to be our main topic today, we're going to do a demo on this whole thing, is we are going to have you guys create your own car materials. So you're going to be either following along with our live session today, and you kind of going off the recording, or you can totally go through the videos in the activity because I basically do the same thing, just in a bit more of a longer kind of broken down process. But we're going to be going through car paint. We're going to talk about how we assign materials properly, how we control the material properties to get different types of looks, like different roughness settings where it's like a matte paint job, a nice shiny paint job. And even with car paint, how do we get that layered effect? Because it's not just the car paint, it's the clear coat and the wax. How do we really build that inside of Maya? Different metals. Some of these are just presets. So since you've already kind of gone through assigning presets previously, this isn't going to be too difficult. And then, by the end, you're really just producing a render of your vehicle. And I think a lot of people end up enjoying this activity so much that they end up turning in multiple images. So if you guys think you're on a roll and you're just like really digging this thing and kind of getting sucked into the process of creating all these different colors and types of vehicles, I would highly encourage you to keep pushing forward. Don't think that just one render is all you need to do. I guess it is technically for the grade, but I mean, if you want to do 2 or 3 and just have some other variations, I would love to check that out. So, this is probably pretty easy. Let's just jump in here and get to the fun stuff. So what I'm gonna do is we're gonna hop over to my project folders, and I've already got a lot of this stuff set up, but I just want to move this out of this directory because I don't want to mess up anything I've already created before. So I'm just going to paste this on the desktop, my classic dumping zone of everything temporary. So we're just going to paste that on the desktop. I do want to show you a couple examples of ones that I built. This is all in the activity you can check out, but these are different vehicles I came up with. So we have one that's kind of more of a dark, uh, our evil vehicle, I guess we'll call it. Matte paint job, a lot of really nice, cool plastic trim, pretty glossy. A couple of metal accent pieces. I think it's chrome back here and on the front. Some anodized red on the rim. And some of these are a little bit more standard, where it's just your classic blue car paint jobs, greens. I'm kind of pairing that with some nice golds, or not golds, like coppers and bronzes, red, white. I like that one quite a bit. Yellow, and that's not a car, but you guys don't have to match any of my renders. So I have them there as an example if you're just kind of stuck and you want to have like a target, because I know a lot of people like to work off like sort of a reference where they're trying to match something. If that's better for you, you can definitely do that. If you're going to kind of go off on your own and try to make your own car, what I want you to do is to at least find reference. Try to find, I mean, you're not going to probably find the same vehicle out there. I mean, you could look it up if you can find the same make and model. But if you can at least find another car that has like a particular look, like you like the color of the paint, you like the types of trim details it's using, is it plastic? Is it mostly metal? Find something that you like and then try to incorporate that into your work. Because I think as long as you guys have reference you're going off of, you will probably be able to get something really, really close. So let's do this. Now I've got Maya open. The first thing I want to do is immediately set the project. So we kind of know the drill because we've done this quite a few times, but Maya's open. We're going to do File, Set Project, and in this case I'm going to go to my desktop. There's my vehicle project folder. It already has all the project folders built, so we don't have to do any of that stuff. But we do want to select the main folder, hit set. So that's telling Maya where it's located. And now what we're going to do is go to open and open the only file in the scenes folder. So vehicle practice. Okay, we're going to hit continue. And if you guys have questions as I'm going through this, because it's a pretty small group, so I don't mind kind of pausing and answering stuff as it kind of pops up. So here's kind of the base scene we're looking at. We've got a camera already set up. That actually isn't locked. I thought I locked it. Okay, one thing you may want to do, because I can't believe I didn't lock this thing. If you go to this camera, I would recommend when you're looking through it, just hitting that little camera lock button at the top. I'm sure you guys remember doing that before back in the previous class, or at least remember me talking about it. But I would highly recommend locking that camera, just in case you accidentally move it off its starting point. Now, if I just hit render, because there are lights in here, here's what it looks like without any adjustments. Okay, super exciting, right? You've got the lights in here. It's got the backdrop. The windows are already done because we haven't really got into transmissions yet. And transmissions are those are materials where light passes through it. So the main kind of theme for these first couple of weeks is reflections, which is those are mainly for opaque surfaces. So basically 90% of the stuff in the world, like plastics, metals, like your laptop, like almost everything is a opaque reflective surface. But things like glass, water, oh my god, like I can't believe I'm just drawing a blank here. Pretty much anything you can see through to some degree, like diamonds, a lot of gemstones, those are transmissions. So that's when light goes through it and you can actually see what's on the other side of the surface. Now, since we don't have any videos yet in week 1 that talks about how to make glass from scratch, I just have this one set up for you so you don't have to worry about it. Now, there are glass presets in the preset browser, as most of you know, so you are, I guess, more than welcome to go in there and play around with the glass presets if you want to try it out. But I'm not expecting you guys to be doing glass on your own at this point. That is something we are going to do, but that's going to be in week 3. So for now, let's do everything else. And we're going to start off with some of the easier things first. I know it kind of seems backwards because you probably would think we'd want to start with the paint job because that's our main thing. But I kind of want to start. Actually, you know what? We are going to do the paint, but before I kind of get to the metal, since the paint job is going to be the most complicated one, I don't want to just jump in there and make that material first because I kind of want to build up to the hard one. But I do at least want to know what the color is going to be because if I can at least define the color, that'll help me figure out what I want to do for the other pieces around it. And you know what? Since this is a live session and it's kind of like the choose your own adventure book, no pressure to you guys, but I'm going to even let you guys pick what color paint job you want me to do. No pressure. What are you guys feeling? It is totally up to you. If there's a particular tone or color, uh, I will try to recreate it. And we get some crazy. Well, I've done this before, and I've got some crazy suggestions. We've had people go like right for hot pink immediately. They're like want to choose the craziest color possible. Primer army green. Okay, let's. So I have another monitor open. Okay, we're gonna look this up to see if we can get something pretty close. So I'm guessing what you want to do. Do you actually want to also have that kind of matte look from like a primer? So it's like kind of dry. So kind of more of that military style. Yeah, mustard yellow could be totally cool too. And those tones aren't really too different, so I think we could easily change that. So maybe what we'll do is we'll start with like that kind of matte green, and then we'll just change it to more of like a mustard color later, and just see what we get. So I got a second screen open here. So I just typed in Army Green Primer. A lot of different results here. So I'm guessing this is all kind of generally what you're talking about, right? Like any of these are probably pretty good. Um, like this guy. Good old Glidden. Yep, that should be a good match. So that's going to be my target. So what I'm going to do just for a moment here is let's hit the little maximize button on the side just to bring this in because I want to get it so this is off to the side. It's kind of dopey trying to get. No, Home Depot. No, 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 no. That's not how we do things here. You will not know my location. Um, all right, so what I'm going to do is just get basically just a simple flat color. Okay, so there's a couple ways to do this. We could jump in the preset browser, but one of the big changes for this activity is I really want to get you guys just kind of a little more comfortable and open to the idea of making a material from scratch. Presets are great, and obviously in other classes, you're more than welcome to use presets if you think it helps you get that result you want more effectively. But a lot of times we can't rely on presets. We really do need to try creating a few things from scratch ourselves, at least just to understand how the material works. And we get a lot more customization by doing it that way. So what I'm going to do is right click up here in this little shader ball thing. And if I right click, you can see we have a bunch of different options. These are all materials. So the same materials that you were seeing in the preset browser, like all these guys. These are Pixar surface materials. So even though RenderMan did take the time to set up a bunch of these for you that you could definitely pick through, you could actually get the same thing by using this material and knowing how to put in the right numbers and colors. You can get any of those materials from the presets. So what I'm going to do kind of something intentionally first, just to show you how to kind of do this a few different ways. So remember when you were doing the preset browser, how what I'm assuming most of you did is you were kind of like selecting your objects first, and then you're doing that like right click, import, and assign to selected. But you were kind of doing that over and over again for like each shader ball one by one. Like this is like a plastic, this one's a metal. You always import and assign to selected. So that is going to automatically assign it to whatever you happen to have selected. Now this is a little trickier though because I have multiple pieces, right? And I don't want to just on every piece do this again, because what's going to happen is you're going to end up creating a unique material for like a dozen different panels on the car. And while it'll technically it would still work. What that means is every single time you want to change the color, you're now going to like 12 materials and trying to get every single one of those to have the same properties. And I'm sure you can imagine how frustrating that would be. If you have an art director say, the green paint's a little too warm or too yellow. How do we make it cooler and kind of push it back the other direction? Well, now you have to click between all these different materials and change it one by one. Very, very annoying to do it that way. So what we're going to do is I'm going to only assign it to maybe, let's just do like the two door panels first. So I'm holding shift, clicking on the other one, and we're only doing two intentionally just to show you how to get around this problem. I'm going to come up here, right click, and we're going to go to Pixar Surface. Now when you click on this Pixar Surface, you basically have sort of imported and assigned that material to the objects, because you'll notice that the selection's disappeared. It's on there. Now we're not seeing it, and I think a couple people had a question. Michelle, you might have been one of them actually, where there was a little confusion, I think, where in the viewport everything went gray until you hit render, and that's actually completely correct. You will not see any color until you hit render, and the reason for that is because you have to kind of remember that everything we see in the viewport is a Maya thing. Like this is a Maya viewport. RenderMan really isn't part of Maya. I mean, it is as a plugin. So because Maya's viewport natively doesn't understand what RenderMan materials are, that's why it's not showing you anything. But basically, when you hit render, what you're doing is you're telling Maya's viewport to kind of swap over to the RenderMan viewport, and then it understands what it has to do to show the color. So it's really just that distinction of Maya viewport, when it's on, it's a RenderMan viewport. Yeah, that's the only thing. And I think I might have talked about it for like a hot minute or a few seconds in one of the videos, but it was super easy to miss. But I didn't want you guys to think that was something broken. It's actually just the way it works. But aside from that, it's pretty easy. So let's just see what we're already working with here. If I hit R, we probably would see, yes, these look a little bit different. Now it's not the same color because you can tell that material that I created is apparently defaulting at like a darker gray. This is called 50% gray, so it's like right in the middle. But it works, right? You can tell something has happened. So we're at least getting that little visual verification there. So let's just turn it off for a second again. Now, I'm going to send everybody a message about this later, but I'm hoping to kind of get this resolved first this week. There is an issue where some of you guys are going to notice that if you open the Hypershade, things crash. And actually, since we have a small group here, for the people that are watching, did you already have the issue last month where Maya would crash if you opened the Hypershade or the attribute editor? If it happened to you, it would have maybe been around the environment lighting project. Because I think a couple people did run into that problem where you, like, as soon as you got to the point where you got to the Pixar Dome light and you tried like loading in one of your maps, Maya would give you like a fatal error and just shut down. I don't know if any of you guys had that problem. Yes, right. And so you guys saw the video and you fixed it. Okay. If you've already done that, you're actually good to go for the whole month. But a lot of people probably still haven't quite run into that problem because they weren't really, going into the right menus and it just happened to never pop up. This is usually the class where everybody hits the issue. And so just to make sure we're all on the same page, what's going to happen is if you open the Hypershade, which is this little blue sphere thing up here next to the render settings, this is what it looks like. It will immediately crash on you. You're going to get the same crashing issue. Now mine, I can actually wish it would crash on my computer so I could figure out why it's doing that. Mine doesn't crash, but I already have my Hypershade set up a certain way like you guys do, just in case it gets weird at some point. But you do want to make sure that this is turned off and this is set to list. And probably everyone in this group has already done that, so there's going to be no issue there. But what that does is it disables icons, and that's what's causing the crashing issue. So you guys are probably okay. For anyone that's going to watch this video later, that's watching the recording of this thing, if you notice there's a crashing issue in the Hypershade, immediately message me and I will send you a video on how to fix it. I'm going to send this fix video to everybody anyway this month, probably over the next couple days, but just in case you do run into it, there is a fix. I have a video recorded to show you how to do that. The other thing I want to do real quick and just see if you guys have done this. In the Maya preferences down in RenderBand, does this area look familiar for everybody here? Have you guys gone into the RenderBand preferences and changed the render threads? This is another one of those things where I kind of talked to a few people about it, sort of individually, but I'm not sure if you're part of that group of people that have changed that. If this doesn't look familiar, this is going to make a huge difference. Okay, so the render threads thing, it should be set to -6 in the Maya preferences. It's not set to -6 by default, by the way. It's -2. For anyone watching this video later, if your render threads are -2, immediately change it to -6. What that's going to do is remove RenderBand's processing power, so it's not using so much of your laptop's resources. Because -2 basically means that about, let me think here, it would be 10 of the 12 cores on your processor, or sorry, 10 of the 12 threads on your processor are being used in the render. It just means every time you hit that blue R button, this thing's going to come to a screeching halt. I'm not even going to show you guys this on the recording because doing an OBS stream on YouTube and having it set this to that number would probably cause my laptop to burst into flames. So we're not going to change it. But make sure you do put it to -6. It's just going to make things run more efficiently. So if you are rendering, you can still do other things while the render is running. Because the render is a super intense process. You don't want that thing to cause your laptop to basically be unusable every time you want to see an image. And that's not really fun for anybody. It'd make you never want to use Maya ever again. So hopefully that makes sense. We're going to go in the Hypershade here. And I do want to rename that material. Now, I have a bunch of videos that talk about how the Hypershade is set up, like all these different pieces. Now, if you guys get in here and your Hypershade looks different, it's totally fine. There are a lot of other things in here that you can make visible, like the property editor is usually over here somewhere. There's like a material viewer. This is up here in the top, not there. Sorry, that's usually over here in that section. There's a creation area that's usually over here, I think. So the Hypershade is very modular, and you can kind of move and collapse all these different pieces. Because I think if you guys haven't changed this before, yours would look like, let's see if I can get it back. No, come on. Right. It's not going to the right spot. You can do it, Maya. I believe in you. No. Oh, good enough. There it is. Okay. This is probably what it looks like for everybody that has never changed anything in the Hypershade. This is ridiculous. There is too much visible. It's taking up too much space. We can't see any of the node graph, which is this little tiny window here. So let's just hit X and close out of all the crap we don't need. Really the only thing you want to have visible in the Hypershade, at least for me, is I just like to have the browser open, which you can always recover here if you delete it. If it looks like this, window browser, just put it at the top. This is our list of everything we have in the Hypershade. That's kind of pretty handy. And the node graph. This is the main section of the Hypershade. We always have this visible. But the other stuff is a bunch of fluff. We don't need it. Now I do want to rename the Pixar surface because we applied it, but this is going to be our car paint eventually. So how do we rename the material? I like using the shortcut. So if you hold down Control and double click, so Control double click, that's a rename shortcut. And I can call this car paint material. See how it's renamed? Looks great. Now the other way to do it, if you don't like the little shortcut, if you click on the material over here in the channel box, you can rename it there. in the attribute editor, you can also rename it right there. So a lot of ways to do the same thing, but either way, definitely name your materials, especially for me too, because when I'm starting to go through your projects, it's much, much easier for me to understand how you built it if I can simply click on the material that says, this is the car paint, this is a plastic piece, this is, a gold or whatever you guys decide to do. Okay, now I've got the car paint on there. Let's just try to get the color. Okay, so I'm gonna turn on the R again. Now, notice how it's rendering the full part of my viewport. Way too much time is being wasted. Now, the cool thing here is that we have a crop tool right there that we can use to control where it's rendering. So if I hit the little crop, one thing you may want to do as well, if you haven't changed this, is change this one next to the crop, put this down to 50%, because since you guys are using a 4K resolution monitor, you definitely want to cut this back to a much, much lower percentage, because the 4K resolution in the viewport is really, really slow. So we're going to cut that back to like 50% the scale. So this is a lot faster. But I do want to hit crop. We're going to marquee drag over the part we're trying to control and release, and see how the IPR render in the viewport is just only rendering that one section. It's a lot faster too. Now, the one thing about the crop is it's still on, and so every time you click, and I'm clicking and dragging, see, it's trying to update the window over and over again. So when you define a crop area that you like, don't forget to turn the button off, just so you can go back to like your regular, selection tool. Because if you forget to do that, you're going to be drawing crops over and over again. Now, if I go to the material, which again, we can access just by clicking on it in the Hypershade, or if you just simply click on the door, you can get to it in the attribute editor by going through the tabs. It shows up right there. So either way, you'll eventually get to the material. And then from here, we change the car paint. So let's try to get a good match here. We're going to click on the little gray color. This guy's going to pop up. And we can get this pretty close. So what we're going to do is first, let's boost up some saturation. We'll just go kind of around here, a little over halfway for right now. Now, the big issue is that we're clearly not getting the right hue. We're defaulting to red. I want to get more of like a gray green. So green's over here. We're just going to kind of click and drag this over. Now, with the hue slider, what you're trying to do is get the right sort of yellow to blue balance of green. Is it like a warmer green or a cooler green? Now, right now, I think we're probably a little too cool. So I might go just a little more towards yellow, just really subtly. And what's the big difference that we're seeing here between my green and the reference? Mine's too rich, right? It's too vibrant. This is more of a gray. That's going to be saturation. So we're going to pull this back. You can already tell just by pulling that saturation back, we're getting really close. Now, what I'm going to do is just move this in a little bit, because it's kind of interesting, because when they're far apart, it actually looks like it's almost the right color. But see, when they get really close, there's still just a little bit of a difference there. So I think we need to pull that saturation back just a little more than it currently is, and it might just still be a little too cool. So we're going to nudge it a little more towards yellow. Let's pull that saturation down just a tiny bit more. What do you guys think? Maybe just a little darker, but it's like pretty much, we're almost there. So if I want to make it darker, I could just drop this guy down just a little bit. That's value. Still might be a little rich, so let's just type in like 0.4 on saturation. Let's try that again. Yeah, now we're getting real close. To me, that feels like a good match. And this is something that you're going to get better at the more you get used to like color correction. Compositors, which is a compositing artist, is kind of near the end of the pipeline. They're constantly talking about matching blacks and whites and midtones, and is it too warm, too cool, what's the red, green, blue value. Their whole world is color correction. So if you do find you get really into the process of like color matching and trying to get the right tone, you may really enjoy getting into lighting, look development, or compositing. They're all really, really cool parts of the industry. All right, so let's put this back over here. I feel like I'm pretty good with the green, so we're just going to minimize that for now and go back to full screen. Okay, So that's good. Now that the one issue I'm kind of running into is now that I've done that, how do I get this car paint on the other pieces? Now this is kind of the issue I was talking about earlier. If I do this again, I'm making a new material and I have to start from scratch and have multiple materials all doing the same thing. So how do I get the material that I've already made on other pieces? That's the big difference here. So I'll show you how to do it. All right, can you guys hear me again? I'm just gonna give this 1 second to kind of reconnect. Let me know if you guys can. Okay, yeah, my computer just kind of freaked out there for a minute, and I saw the audio just died on me. But what happened right before I got cut out, I just want to make sure I put that same material on the other pieces, and here's how we do it. If you have the Hypershade open, I'm just going to kind of put this down here for a moment. We're going to click on all the pieces that don't currently have the paint. Now, it's a little frustrating because like you almost have to kind of like render it to kind of remember what it's assigned to, but thankfully we know it's only the doors, so it's not going to be too difficult. So I'm going to click on the body. You can see this is all one piece, so that's going to be easy. I probably want to do the door handles, so I'm going to hold shift and click on that. I'm going to say we do, I think I'm going to leave this, and we're going to do a black on this. That might be kind of slick. Actually, let's do this green. I'll do black hood, and I'll do black on this part. And then we'll do chrome or black on the mirrors, I think. I'm probably going to leave this black as well, but basically I've found the other pieces that I just want to apply the green to. So when you select your pieces, what you're going to do is when the Hypershade is open, you want to right mouse button, hold down right mouse button over this, and you're going to do assign material to selection. Now you want to be careful because if you left click on this, if you left click on this thing, watch what happens if I click on the material. See how I lose my selection, right? Let me undo it. So you want to be careful because you'll lose the selection if you click on it. So you want to hold right mouse button so you don't lose your selection of the objects. That way you can then just simply drag up and gesture to assign material to selection, release, it's on there. And to show you that, if I hit the R, let's see what happened. And you can totally have the render running, by the way, when you do this. You don't have to stop the render. If the render is still running and you do that same thing, it will probably update immediately. So we can do that and show you. So if I spin the camera around, let's just say for sake of argument, you want to have like the hood, have the same green. We can totally do that. We can go in there, and if I hold right mouse button over material, assign material to selection, you can see the render updates and see something changed. We get the green on there, and now we have green on the hood. Now there is a way to revert it back to default. Like let's say that we put the green on the hood and we really didn't mean to. It was more of like a mistake. There's another material in here called Lambert 1. This is actually what's on everything else. This is the starting material. So if I click on the hood and hold right mouse button down over Lambert 1 and do assign Lambert to selection, you'll see it goes back to the white. So as long as you sort of practice and just sort of get comfortable with the idea of like selecting objects, holding right mouse button down and gesturing to whatever you want, you will very quickly be able to get this stuff working. I'm going to show you one more thing that is a trick that I've used for years that is extremely helpful. All right, check this out. I'm going to make another material, and this time I'm not going to assign it to anything. We're just going to make another material separately to just test something out. Maybe we don't know which version we want to use. We're going to do that mustard color you guys were talking about earlier. So we're going to make a new Pixar surface without anything selected. I'm just going to click it. Now, because I didn't have anything selected, it is not currently assigned to anything, but it's in the scene. You can see there it is. So we're going to do Control, double click. We're just going to rename it. We'll call this car paint. We'll call it mustard material. Actually, let me rename this other one. This is going to be car paint army. So I have car paint army car paint mustard. And I just want to maybe swap the two materials out. So how do I take everything that had the army green material and put that mustard yellow material on it? This is a material swap. So watch this. If I know that this is the one I want to reassign to this one, if you hold your right mouse button down over the material that's currently assigned, you know how before we were using this? Look at the one to the right. Select objects with material. This little shortcut is one of the most helpful things that people don't know about in the Hypershade, because if you do select objects with that material, look what happens. You immediately get a selection of any object in the scene without you clicking around and doing it manually. And then I can simply hold the right mouse button over the mustard, assign material to selection, it swaps it out. So I can go backwards too. Okay, so right mouse button over the mustard, select, right mouse button over the army, assign. That's a material swap. It's not really too difficult once you just get used to doing it, but that is a huge time saver in more advanced projects because you don't have to really click around and think about what object is using it. You just do these little shortcuts in the Hypershade to make it a lot faster for you. So let me just actually get the mustard one set up too. So we're going to do select, assign, and it's clearly not mustard right now, so let's just fix that real quick. I love how we are totally going to mustard. Mustard. Here we go. You can do it, Google. I believe in you. All right, let's get some good mustard going here. This is fantastic. So we're going to jump in there. We're going to do saturate. I'll do it a little bit faster this time. So we're going to bump that up. More saturation. A little too red. Let's go right about there. That is a beautiful mustard. Yeah, I really think we've nailed this. So, all right, then we get our mustard set up as well. Okay. That's pretty. All right, so let's put that back to army green now that we've seen that. Okay. So we're good there. Now, since I have this done, what we're going to do is very quickly go through and set up some of the other trim pieces. Now, with the army green, I kind of think we should go for more of like a rugged look where we do like a lot of like black trim. But again, it's kind of up to you once you find your reference. So let's do like a lot of black trim through here. I might do some chrome accents on the bolts, and I'm going to do a black hood. So a lot of these we're going to use presets. So we're going to click on this right here. Let's do a split view. Make this a little bit easier for us. We're going to do side cam here. This is going to be perspective. So you probably remember me using split view quite a bit in the previous class. So because I want to render it here, we're going to collapse the outliner down to make a little more room. There we go. And let's get the black pieces going here. So thankfully not everything's visible, but let's assign a new Pixar surface to those. We're going to just control, double click. We're going to call it black trim material. Okay, so it's already there. We're just going to click on the object, go to this part in the attribute editor where I can see it. And I just want to get the tone of black right. Let's just bring that down. Now it's kind of gray, and I really want to get a true black. So we're going to go really low. Now the one thing we're kind of running into here is that even though we did darken it down quite a bit, I mean, it's almost completely off. It's very, very close to being like pure black with no value at all. It's not very believable, right? Doesn't it look very flat? So one of the key things here is when you're breaking down a material, even though we're doing color, you have to kind of remember that this is not really the only thing that makes a material look the way it does. It's probably the most obvious part, but there's so many other parts that make up material properties. There's specular reflections, there's transmissions like glass, we haven't done that yet. There's iridescence, light scattering into the surface like candle wax. Is there a clear coat, right? That's something we want to do on probably the car paint. Are there little paint flakes? Is it metallic? Are the reflections tinted like gold or copper? So the thing we're going to do for this is we need to make a specular reflection. This is a diffuse reflection. This is specular. And so specular reflections are going to give us that nice shine. So the good thing is, even though this is it's a little complicated to talk about in this live session without it taking up the rest of the time, I do want to at least show you a really good starting point for these settings for like 90% of the materials you do. We have face and edge color, an exponent, and something called roughness. These two right here and roughness are really the key to getting specular reflections to look good. Now, I'm just going to bring up face color by itself, and I want you to look at how touchy this thing is. I've really barely moved it, right? And look at how reflective that is. You can tell this is almost starting to transition into like chrome, where it's not even up to 100%, and this thing already looks really metallic. It's like a metal. So if you're doing more of a plastic, which I'm trying to do, like a really dark metal or a plastic, I want to keep this much, much lower, like this. I'm just using face color to get the intensity right, and it doesn't need much, unless I'm doing a metal or a mirror, but I'm not in this case. Now the edge color is going to be pushed up a little higher. This is what we need to do to create a Fresnel reflection. I'm not going to get into this right now, but basically specular reflections change based on the angle you're looking at the surface. So like if you guys are sitting at your laptop right now, you're probably at a desk. Um, if you have like kind of fairly dark lights, or if you have like reflections on the table, just do me a favor real quick. Look directly down at your desk or your laptop and try to see reflections from light sources around you. It probably looks pretty matte or not reflective when you're looking directly down at the surface from above. And I'm doing this right now in the office. And I'm sure it looked pretty stupid. But I'm now going to take my head and I'm kind of leaning back. I'm going to get like a glancing angle where I'm kind of lowering my head down to the table and like looking across the surface at a really extreme angle. What you'll notice is that depending on your position relative to the surface, that the way it reflects light is going to look completely different. Oh, I think my stream just kind of paused there for a second, but it changes based on your glancing angle. And so that's a key thing to how specular reflections work. And I get a lot more into this in the video, but these settings right here of this being really low, like about maybe 10% or 5% up, and this being about halfway, is probably right around where you want to have it for most of the materials you want to do. And there are exceptions like with metals where we'd crank this up a lot higher, but this is pretty good. And when you watch the videos in 1.2, all this stuff with Fresnel reflections and specular reflections will make a lot more sense. So we're just kind of getting this set up as a very simple preset. The only thing that really, once you do these guys like this, that you probably would change would be the roughness. And the roughness is a very, very important attribute. This is something you're going to be adjusting a lot this month. Specular roughness does this. If I have it lower, look at the way it reflects. And I'm going to let's actually do this on this camera so I can get in really close because I want you to see how this changes. Now, one thing that's kind of annoying is see how when I'm rendering, how I can't click on it to get to the material without it showing a selection. If the selection highlighting bothers you, you can disable that here and turning off the selection highlighting in your viewport. You can turn it back on later, but by doing that, it now looks really shiny, and I can click on things without it popping up. I might turn it off here as well. So I'm still selecting things, you just don't see the little highlight thing pop up. Now I'm going to change the roughness. This is low. See how it looks really smooth? Watch the reflections that go up. What we're doing is basically diffusing the reflection. We're making it rougher, right? That's exactly what this thing sounds like. It's making a rougher surface, and so the light scatters more, and you don't get those really nice tight highlights. You're now getting more of a matte effect. And obviously I'm only halfway up, and if I keep going, it's going to get drier and drier until really the point where it almost just looks like it's a really, really matte plastic. So it's what your goal is when you look at the reference, you're just kind of dictating how blurry or sharp you want the highlight to be. And it's just you'll get better at it the more you start analyzing reference. This is just the first time you've been exposed to it. So maybe in this case, because I'm going to have a matte paint job, I'm going to leave the trim a little bit shinier in this case. So we have some nice contrast with the highlights. That looks pretty good. Okay, let's assign this to a few other pieces. I'm going to actually we're going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to put that on the hood and a couple other pieces. So we're going to do, actually I do want to have the selection on for just a second so I can see what I'm clicking on. The hood, these little vents, if I can get in there. There we go. I'm going to right mouse button over the black trim, assign. All right, let's go over here. I'm going to do another black one for some of the plastic and like the rubber trim around here. Actually, these I could probably get away with having the same black. Okay, let's do another one real quick for a drier rubber for the tires and the trim right here around the window. All right, we'll do this a little bit faster this time. So right click. I have nothing selected, by the way. Pixar surface. Control double click. This is going to be, we'll call this our rubber material. So anything using rubber. Click. Okay, let's put this on the tire first just so I can see it. So we're going to click on the tire. Let's actually do a couple tires. That guy, this guy back here. Right mouse button, assign. Let's just spin that back around again. All right, we're going to do show selection highlighting back off just so I can see what's going on again. So I can click on it. Rubber material is going to be really dark, just like before. Now, the tire is going to be a lot drier than like some of these other pieces. So I'm still going to do kind of the same settings here, but see how when I do that, it gets that very shiny look, which I don't really want in this case. It looks too plastic. So we're going to bring the roughness up a lot higher to make that drier rubber effect on this. So it's kind of interesting because this is really very, very similar to the material we did before, but because I chose a higher roughness, you can see how texturally they do feel very different. And that's only with this one slider. But aside from that, they're almost identical, but they have a big difference visually still. I'm going to come down here and do a little trick too, where I do like a little bit of a polish on the top. In the video, I have a video where I talk about using iridescence. We're going to do that real quick. Iridescence is going to give you that kind of, like, you know how when you mix oil and water, you get those really cool like rainbow striations where the light at different depths will kind of like cause it to reflect back at these like different colors. That's what iridescence is trying to do. So I'm going to do the same thing here with face and edge, where I just barely bump these up. And you can actually see it. It's trying to do these like kind of rainbow effects on top of everything else. It's very touchy, so I am going to pull this back quite a bit because I don't want it to be that strong. Just a hint of something there. And even that might be too much. If you like the effect of like the shininess on the surface, but you're just not crazy about the saturation because it's very vibrant, you can definitely go in here to the colors because they're pure red and blue. You could go in there and just simply pull the saturation back on this just a little bit. And now we kind of get a fainter tone of this. So this is kind of more up to you to artistically figure out what you want to do. The tire is never really going to look completely believable because there's no tread. I mean, this is basically a slick. You're not going to have any traction with this thing at all. There's no detail on the wheel, the side of the wheel, where you'd have like the tire's manufacturer and the width of the tire. It's really, really simple. So you don't need to push this too far without it looking kind of silly. I think I might leave this off in this case. I was kind of digging it more without it personally. All right, let's do some chrome real quick. I need to get that, actually, the rubber on the trim right there. So let's do selection highlighting. We're going to click on this. What else do I want to do? I'm going to have that. I actually might do, let's do this as that same rubber as well back there. So we'll have that rubber. We're going to get a Chrome material from the preset browser, so let's do that as well. So in this case, Chrome is pretty straightforward. You don't have to really recreate this. They already have a good preset. So let's go in here to plain. I'm just going to import Chrome, I think, and then assign it later. So we're going to right-click on Chrome, just import it. What that's going to do is just bring it into your Hypershade, and now we're just going to put it on whatever we want. So let's see here. We're going to do this guy, the little key area. Let's do the lug nuts. This is like this little emblem here. Let's just assign that. So this is what it looks like with chrome and all those pieces. Looks pretty good. Let's do the trim. Like that. We're going to spin around to the front. Click, right click, chrome. Kind of flying through it. And I'm only really going to do what's visible. Now keep in mind that a lot of the front and the back of the vehicle. Oh, come on. There we go. I freaked out there for a second. The back and the front you really can't see. So if I go back to this one, if I don't really see any of that stuff like the lights, the grill, I'm not going to worry about it. Yeah, we can't see any of that stuff. I do want to get maybe a chrome on this. So let's just do that. It probably should be more of like a perfect mirror on the inside part, but we're not going to worry about that. All right, let's do some of the lug nuts there in the middle, and then we're going to wrap it up with the clear coat on the paint. All right, so we're going to do chrome on those, I think. Yeah, we'll do the clip is chrome. We're going to come over here to this one. Just holding shift, whoops, undo. Do all that. And you guys know about undo, right? You've probably been using this quite a bit. Control Z is when you undo something, just to back up. All right, so let's go in here and do chrome. And it should update, but I don't think it is. Let me try it again. There we go. Yeah, it's chrome. You can barely see that. All right, I'm going to do some black rim. I'll do a black rim with a chrome trim. Now this is kind of an interesting issue here, because if I click on the rim, see how the rim is one piece? Now let's just say, we're going to kind of keep it simple. What if I wanted to use the same black, that kind of like metal thing we did here? It's close enough. So let's just do that. We're going to click on both of these. I don't think it really matters with the ones on the other side, because you probably can't see it, but we'll do it anyway. So I'm just going to assign, yes, this one right here. So it's putting black on there. Now what I want to do though, which is a little different, is I want to get part of this rim to have a different color, like right on the lip. I want that to be chrome. I'm going to show you guys a really cool thing we can do here. We're going to turn off the render for a second, and I'm going to open up the UV editor. All right, so UV editor is right here. This is sort of an optional part. You don't have to do this. These are UVs. So let's just move this stuff to the side. I'm going to click on the rim because I want you to see what this looks like. So if you guys look at this, and this could be the first time you've ever seen the UV editor, unless you've opened it up by accident, what do you guys think this is? So I'm kind of curious what everyone currently watching the stream thinks this UV editor is trying to show us. It's a really weird look. So you can see the wireframe of it, right? So it's showing you this, it's still the 3D shape, but you'll notice that the UV editor is not a 3D viewport. Like you can't like move around in here and see the back side of the rim. Yeah, it's kind of like layers. It's basically breaking it into pieces though, right? Kind of like what you're talking about with layers. So you can think of the UV editor or UVs in general as being your two-dimensional representation of the 3D object. So the way I usually would describe this in some of my lectures with UVs is I would talk about this like reverse origami. You're starting with a 3D shape and you're trying to cut the 3D shape up into pieces so you can flatten it down into like 2D, almost like pieces of paper, like little cutouts. What you're seeing is the 2D sort of paper version that makes up the three-dimensional shape. That's kind of what we're seeing right here. You can see if I hold right mouse button and go to UV shell, if I highlight over these, it kind of shows you how this is all broken up. This is going to be such a really big part of your education, because if a lot of you guys start getting into like modeling, whether it's characters, environments, your whole world is going to be understanding how 3D and 2D components kind of work together. Because when you make a texture is 2D, right? Like if you're in Photoshop, which is something you're probably all pretty familiar with. You go into Photoshop, that's a two-dimensional texture, but you're putting a 2D texture on a 3D surface. How does Maya know how to do that? This is the answer. It uses the UVs to tell you if you did put a 2D texture on the wheel, where does it show up? This is kind of our bridge between the 2D and 3D world. It's just the first time you've probably seen it. Now, the reason I'm showing you this today isn't because you guys are doing textures. We're doing this for a little bit of a trick where we can actually put materials on individual pieces of this thing to break it up. So instead of me doing like a selection of the whole rim and then assigning material to it, I actually could do a selection of a UV shell, because I've already done the work for you and broken it up. I could break up the UV shell and put a different material on that. So like, for example, if I click on this right here, I'm just holding right mouse button, so I'm in UV shell mode. Click to select. We're going to go back in the Hypershade, and I'm going to right click on Chrome, assign material to selection. Now let's just come over here, right mouse button, object, so I can click on the rim. Let's go back here, click on it again so it refreshes. Right mouse button, UV shell, click on this part for the other rim. We're going to do the same thing. Right mouse button, Chrome. Okay, so let's just do a render. Right mouse button, object mode again. And if I just render this little window right here, we'll probably notice it has a chrome lip. Yep, it worked. You can see we have this little trim detail now, and it looks a little bit different. And depending on what kind of look you're going for, let me back up a little bit more here. You could definitely decide, you know what, I kind of like the chrome. I wish it went a little bit farther in. You can always go back and kind of do some other areas. So here's this part, right? We'll do that. Let's try this piece out. So we're going to go in, Chrome, assign. And now I have that is also included. Click on this piece over there, right click, UV shell, select that piece, right click on Chrome, assign, and there we go. And now we have Chrome on pieces of one singular object, but we're doing it by UV shell. And you're going to learn how to bake the UVs in another class. That's going to be something we kind of pepper in at different points throughout the program. Not many people really specialize in doing UVs because it's probably not the most enjoyable thing to do for the rest of your life, but I actually do like creating UV maps. It's kind of like putting together a puzzle. All right. So let's turn this one off. I want to see what's really left. I'm kind of hoping we're down to just the car paint. It's probably close enough. I didn't do the little orange light here, but we're going to pretend we're done. Okay, the last thing we want to do here, because we're kind of running out of time, is I do want to show you how to build the actual car paint, because the only thing we did is we just chose the green color. Now we can wrap it up and do the rest. Now, I actually haven't saved this at all, which is terrifying. Let's go in here and call this vehicle lecture. It's actually amazing this has not crashed on me today, but we're going to click, okay, we're going to start the render. I'm going to go over here to the attribute editor. Let's get out of iridescence. So all we did is set up the green. I'm going to build this just like I do in the video real quick with you guys. So car paint is made up of a couple things. We have the paint itself that has its own color, its own specular reflections, but on top of that, there is a clear coat. So there's sort of layers that work with car paint. So we're going to do the primary spec the same way we did the other pieces. This is pretty easy. We're just going to do a little bit of face color. See, there's that highlight popping up. A little bit more edge color. See how it's like the edge color? It's actually kind of interesting when you watch how it updates. See how you mostly see it on the edge? Like look at the top of the roof. Right? But the highlights in the middle are staying the same. That's showing you visually where you see the edge color. So you can really exaggerate this a little bit more if you want to get kind of more of a dynamic silhouette where it kind of pops from the background. Now the roughness for the car paint is going to be a little bit higher. We might do maybe 0.35, 0.4 maybe. So we're going to kind of diffuse the highlight a little bit for the paint. This is where it's going to feel a little bit cooler. I'm going to do a matte paint job in a second as well, but let's do more of a traditional paint job. So we're going to come down here. I'm going to change this to physical, because physical, by the way, if you look at the settings between clear coat and primary specular, see how they look the same? These will actually do the same thing. So it really doesn't matter if you, on another material, if you did this here or down here, it actually would visually look the exact same way, just like rough specular is the same thing. So they kind of do the same effect. The reason why this material has 3 areas that all do the same thing is because you can make them do different things, and that's what gives you this kind of layered specularity where it's not just one surface. You're thinking about the pieces that layer together to make a more complicated surface. And so with the clear coat, I'm probably going to start off with like the same settings where I do this, but with the roughness, I'm going to have it lower than the roughness up here. And you'll notice that we kind of get this interesting effect where there's almost like 2 highlights blending together. There's that really sharp, kind of tight one here from the clear coat, but below that, there's a rougher speck kind of behind it. And if I play around with it, you can sort of see both of them kind of adjusting. They're just mixing together. And so really the only thing we're kind of down to is playing around with these guys with the roughness until we sort of get the right gradients between the 2 surfaces. And that just takes practice to get to that point. But the cool thing here with the clear coat is if you go to physical, it's going to change things a little bit. The one thing that makes the physical option a little different is it's still the same setup, but they have this one little extra section here that's important called layer thickness, and I do really like this. What layer thickness does is it's defining the thickness of the clear coat, because if you have a thicker clear coat, in theory, it should allow less light to pass through it, and so it will darken the information behind it. So if I go to the thickness and bump it up, you'll notice that we get a darker paint behind it because this is absorbing some of the light. So this is, when we do this, we're kind of getting into more of like you're trying to like actually think of real measurements and treat it more of like a real physical thing. So think of this as being more like physically correct, hence the word physical, versus artistic, which is what it sounds like. You're artistically tweaking it until it looks good, as opposed to you like actually treating it more of like the real thing in the real world. They both work fine. This is you just playing around with things and deciding the way you want to handle it. Now, this one right here is probably a little too rough if you're doing like a standard paint job, so I'd probably bring the roughness down a little bit. And let's just do a crop so it's a little faster here. But if you guys want to go for more of a matte paint job, really the only thing you would change in this case is your clear coat is going to be a lot rougher. The paint would probably be the same, but this guy for sure would be a lot higher. So in that case, we'd just crank up the roughness on this, and now we've created more of a matte paint job. So I actually personally think the matte one looks better in this particular case based on how we kind of did the other parts. I kind of like the contrast and of the rougher surface next to all those kind of shiny blacks around it. But it's looking pretty good, right? So let's turn off crop, turn off the R. The only thing we're down to at this point is reducing the final render. And we'll make this pretty quick here. So we're going to save the scene one more time. Let's say we get to the point where you guys have knocked it out of the park and you're feeling pretty good about it. We want to do the final image. How do we do that? Well, if you're in this view, we're going to hit the blue R on the shelf. It's going to pop up the wonderful image tool, and you can see it's going to start rendering here real quick. And eventually, if we wait long enough, it will finish. So let's just close out of the hypershade. It's going to take a little bit. What I want you guys to kind of start practicing this month, though, is don't just hit the render button and then just assume it's going to look good. There's issues that are going to happen with projects like this where you're now trying to troubleshoot grain. Grain is a big problem, and I don't want you waiting for the whole render to find out that something's a little noisy. So just what I did is I kind of stopped the render early because I want you to really look at this render and think about where is the worst noise. That looks terrible, right here. I mean, nothing looks great, but This looks pretty bad. This area right here is unusually noisy. Right here is pretty bad. Find an area or a pocket of the image that looks awful and focus on that. So for example, let's say we want to focus in this little region right here. I'm going to hit crop. This crop tool right here is just like this guy that we're using in the viewport. It works basically the same way. You're going to hit crop, and then I want you to marquee drag over a part of the image that looks terrible, which is for sure that area right there. Any part looks terrible, so it doesn't really matter. When you've drawn your crop down, you can click and move it if you want, but draw it down. If you don't like it, hit the X, click, do it again. But once it's ready, what you're going to do is hit R. So R is a shortcut to render again. If you hit this, it won't work, but if you do render again in the image tool, watch what happens. Hitting R in the image tool with render again, if the crop is down, means the image tool will try to only render anything within the crop. And the reason we're doing that is because I want to get a really quick render. This is honestly still probably too big to get quick feedback, but I'm doing a quick render so I can just really easily see if this finished, how bad is this really going to get. So I'm going to actually shrink this down just a little more here. We're going to do a really tiny pocket like this. Let's do R one more time. We're going to zoom in, and you can see this is flying through it much faster now. It's basically so fast you can't even see the tiles fanning out from the center. And if it looks good, then we probably don't have to change anything. But we're just going to double check. Okay, it's not too bad. It actually looks pretty decent. There we go. Okay, that's done. Let's click on this and hit backspace, backspace. I'm going to go back to the original. One other area I did want to check, I have to click back on the pan tool so I can move over here. Crop, click, let's drag. I really do want to check this one section because this looked terrible earlier. Let's hit R, and I'm going to render this one little area. That's actually getting cleaned up quite a bit. This might be not as bad as I was expecting. It's kind of cool seeing it like slowly clean everything up though when it's going that quick. Yeah, it's still doing it. If you zoom in really close, you can still kind of see little things shifting around, but it's actually not looking too bad. And done. Almost done. That last percent, that's the killer. There we go. Let's hit 1 to 1. So we put it back. Oh yeah, from this distance, this looks honestly pretty good compared to where we started. So it actually will clean up a lot of the noise, thankfully. So I actually feel pretty good about where we're at. Just in case you guys do want a couple tips on what you could do though. Oh, that's why it looks good. I saved the scene with my settings cranked up. Okay, that makes sense. When you guys get in the scene, what I want you to do is when you get to the end, go to your render settings for me and check what this and these 3 guys are set to. I'm going to go back to default, which it might be like this in your project. 128, 111. If I'd rendered with this, it probably would not look very good. I want you guys for the rest of the month as a good starting template, just like a good starting point for all your renders. Keep your max at 256. Make sure everything else is still default. If you ever move something from the default setting and you don't remember what it should be set to, if you click on the right side of the attribute, you can say revert to default value. That will put it back to something that was maybe changed. So apparently that had changed at some point. They all do that, revert to default. These you're going to put to 4, 4, 4. So 0, 256.05, 444. If you do that for probably all your renders this month, I guarantee they will look probably pretty good for all your submissions. There's a lot more that goes into this that we're going to talk about in later classes where we actually break down the math of what these are doing and how you refine it on a more project-to-project basis. But right now, since we're still so early on, I don't want you guys worrying about that. I just want you to sort of have a good answer that you can use temporarily. This is a really good starting point. Use that for pretty much everything, and you should be fine for the rest of your projects this month. But yeah, aside from that, it's just render it. Make sure you burn in mapping on save turned on. Save in G. You've all saved images before, so I'm not too worried about that. Do you guys have any questions about anything that we went over today? And we kind of blew through 1.3 basically in the live session. It's a pretty cool little project, though. I think you guys will have a lot of fun playing around with the different material properties. All right, cool. Well, if there's no questions, then we'll call the meeting adjourned. You guys enjoy the rest of your night. I should have some grades updated tomorrow, and if I don't talk to you tomorrow, enjoy your weekend, and we'll catch up again next week. Yep, no problem. Have a good night, everybody.